Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, are you aware of what's coming, what really is already here, but something we've been talking about for well over a year? We've talked about it a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, and now we've seen it for a past year playing out, but we're seeing it more and more now. What am I talking about? I'm talking about food shortages. Now let's look at this article right here from The Independent. It says Britain is the empty basket case of Europe as supermarkets ration food and vegetables. It says Britain's biggest supermarket has begun rationing fresh fruit and vegetables as a row erupted over shortages that have left shelves bare. Tesco has followed Aldi, Asda, and Morrison's in introducing limits on items customers can buy. A shortage of tomatoes has widened to other fruit and vegetables due to a combination of bad weather and transport problems in Africa and Europe. But farmers and retailers have pointed the finger at Brexit, with former Sainsbury chief executive Justin King saying shops had been hurt by the decision to leave the European Union. He said North Kent previously had the largest greenhouses in Europe, but it's a sector that's been hurt horribly by Brexit. We'll come to that in a second. He also said supermarkets had suffered from the government's decision to exclude the industry from its energy support scheme. So here we have a shortage. Limits are being put on the number of fruits and vegetables that customers can buy because there's a shortage of those fruits and vegetables. Now, this article goes on, not just here, but throughout, to blame Brexit. You know, this is all the fault of Brexit. If only they had stayed in the wonderful European Union, then none of this would be happening. But as we'll see as we read through, that is simply not true. It's just propaganda. And we're going to go through this article and we'll talk about why. We've talked in the past about some of these things. They hint at one of those right here in the opening paragraph when he says, North Kent previously had the largest greenhouses in Europe, but it's a sector that's been hurt horribly by Brexit. Well, no, it's not been hurt horribly by Brexit. It's been, you know, if you want to blame government policies, government energy policies in particular, and the rising cost of energy in Europe and the UK, then yes, that is the case. Those greenhouses take a lot of energy. We actually had a story months ago where we talked about this and we said, come this time right now, there will be a shortage of fruits and vegetables in the UK because these greenhouses took a lot of energy to operate. It takes a lot of energy to keep those greenhouses warm, to grow the fruits and vegetables. Then they have to store the fruits and vegetables. And the energy costs were too high for them to compete with imported products from Spain, West Africa, other places. And so, therefore, they were just turning those greenhouses off. And so they hint at that in the story when they say they previously had the largest greenhouses. Well, why did they previously have it? Because the energy costs were low. Now they're too high. They're uncompetitive. So they've shut those greenhouses down. That means less vegetables, less fruit. This goes on. It says, in winter, the UK imports around 95% of its tomatoes and 90% of its lettuces, mostly from Spain and North Africa. Growers and suppliers in Morocco have faced cold weather, heavy rain, flooding, and canceled ferries in the past 4 weeks, all of which have reduced the amount of fruits and vegetables reaching Britain. And I'm sure that is true, but again, just because 95% of the tomatoes, 90% of the lettuces are imported in winter, that may be true, but domestically, there were things that didn't need to be imported because they were grown there, and now they are not. They have not been grown there because of the energy costs. And we'll get into this soon, but also these energy costs in Morocco and Spain, North Africa, have also gone up. The cost of fertilizer, which is a direct correlation to energy, the price of natural gas, driving those fertilizer prices up, means that less fertilizer is used, or what is used then drives up the price of what is grown. So all of this is a result of energy and government policies, not Brexit. But, and again, cold weather, heavy rain, flooding, all those things happened. But I'm sure they've had those things in years past, and they didn't have fruits and vegetables disappearing from the shelves. So it can't be that alone. They're just not telling us the whole truth, right? It says shoppers in France, Spain, Portugal, Greece, Poland, and Italy have been mocking Britain by posting pictures of green grocers near them with plentiful supplies, particularly of tomatoes. And I would warn those shoppers in France, Spain, Portugal, Greece, Poland, and Italy, well, don't get too high and mighty yet, because, guys, it's coming to you too. You just haven't experienced it yet. But you have the exact same problems the UK has. You're just a little bit behind. So just wait. I wouldn't be mocking people in Britain right now. But this goes on. The rest of this article just, it's Brexit, it's Brexit, it's Brexit. And we get here because, the further down you go in the story, the more truthful news stories tend to get, right? So it says, the reason that we have food shortages in Britain and not Spain or anywhere else in the EU is because of Brexit, right? And also because of disastrous conservative government that has no interest in food production, farming, or even food supply. Yes, I will agree with that. The government policies to restrict farming, to drive up energy cost, drive up labor cost, all of these things is a big contributing factor, if not the factor, and the reason why this is happening. But here we get to what we were just saying. UK growers say that because of higher electricity prices, they planted produce later this year to reduce their energy consumption in greenhouses. That's what we've been talking about. Again, what we talked about months ago. They also blame a combination of rising transportation costs following fuel price hikes and inflation, pushing up prices for seeds, fertilizer, and feed. Cost of checking seeds entering the UK for viruses have also risen. But no, it's Brexit, right? So we go back down, and of course, the lead's always buried, so let's go all the way through this whole article where they're blaming Brexit, and we get to the very last paragraph. How many people have gotten to the last paragraph of the story at this point? Maybe 1% of the people that saw the headline, if that. And then it says, asked whether Brexit was having an impact on the shortages. Not just was the cause, but is it even having an impact? A spokesperson told the BBC, we remain in close contact with suppliers who are clear, not ambiguous, but clear, that current issues related to the availability of certain fruits and vegetables were predominantly caused by poor weather in Spain and North Africa, where they're produced. So this spokesperson's telling the BBC, no, it's not Brexit. But their whole article is about how it is about Brexit. And of course, really, it's not about the poor weather either. That may be what they're saying. And again, that's true. But the poor weather is only impacting what was planted or what was grown, what was fertilized. And that is the key. So we'll keep reading on. We have this article from CNN. It says, why UK supermarkets are rationing fruit and vegetables. Major UK supermarkets have started rationing the sale of some staple fruits and salad vegetables, blaming poor weather in Spain and North Africa for shortages the UK government warned could last a month. So again, here we have, it's poor weather in Spain and North Africa. That's the culprit, right? And so we read down where they give an overview of, limiting purchases. There's a cap, 2 packs per customer on tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, lettuce. Basically telling us what is happening, right? And we get here, the tomato crop in southern Spain is 20% smaller than a year ago. Is that because of poor weather? Or is it because of something else? Could it be, it just happened to be a fifth of the crop was wiped out by poor weather in the last few weeks? That's what they'd have us believe if we keep reading this stuff, or from what we've read so far. And Brexit, right? So the UK leaving the European Union caused the tomato crop in southern Spain to be 20% smaller than it was a year ago. That makes sense, right? So we keep going down where they keep telling us the story. Oh, what is this? Here we have soaring input prices. Buried all the way down in the story, we get soaring input prices. What does that mean? Well, it says high input costs have contributed to the shortages, not contributed, are mostly responsible for the shortages of fruit and vegetables, the NFU says, as well as reduced production. Keep that in mind, reduced production across the farming sector more broadly. And that's not just in the UK, that's worldwide. Labor shortages and soaring energy prices are hitting the poultry industry, already reeling from avian influenza, as well as horticultural businesses and pig farms. Batters said in a speech Tuesday, the price of natural gas, and again, this is something we talked about a long time ago. It says a key input for nitrogen-based fertilizers. So nitrogen-based fertilizers are directly derived from natural gas, which has seen its price in Europe soar over the past year and a half. It says shot up following Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year. Again, that's not completely true. It did shoot up following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but it had already gone up because we wrote an article, the End Times Bible Prophecy newsletter from January 2022 was talking about the coming food shortages as a result of the soaring price of natural gas and the soaring price of fertilizers as a result of that. The soaring input costs for transportation, diesel farm equipment, all of these things. All of this was happening months before Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia invading Ukraine made it worse, but it was already happening because of the lockdowns, the money printing, the currency printing, all of these things. The inflation. So it says, though gas prices have fallen back in recent weeks, they are still triple their historical average, while fertilizer costs are up 169% since 2019. So that's almost triple what they were just 4 years ago, less than 4 years ago. It says, according to the NFU, the production of tomatoes and cucumbers is expected to fall to the lowest levels since the union started keeping records in 1985 on the back of crippling input costs. I thought it was because of Brexit and poor weather in Spain and North Africa, but it turns out that the lowest levels of production on record are on the back of crippling input cost. Woods at Mintech said processing and storing vegetables such as tomatoes was, quote, energy intensive. And again, we've been warning about this for over a year, well over a year, for months. We've kept warning about it, saying this was coming, and now here it is. And so, again, what are they saying is happening in North Africa? Let's go read what's going on in Morocco. Well, we have this from Reuters. Morocco bans some vegetable exports to West Africa amid rising prices. It says Morocco has barred fruit and vegetable traders from exporting tomatoes, onions, and potatoes to West African countries, its Fresh Produce Association and a government official said on Thursday. The decision by the Agricultural Food Export Authority was informed to a trader by phone, and it cited a need to ensure food security at home after tomato prices rose. So, guys, this is something we've talked about also for over a year, is that when these things started to hit, once countries started to realize and government officials started to realize that the high cost of fertilizer, the shortages of fertilizer, would lead to less fertilizer being applied, which would lead to less crop yield, which would lead to less food. that you would start to see export bans by various countries that are trying to protect their own food supply. And so who's that going to impact? That's going to impact those countries that are most reliant on imports to supply their food. And in this case, we have the UK is dependent on these vegetables coming from Morocco, Spain, other North African countries, because domestically their production has been ravaged by these high energy costs. And so why is this ban on West African countries and not on all exports? Well, as we've also said for months on end, the countries that can afford to pay the highest price for exports will get those exports, and those that can't are going to be left out. And so the UK has the wealth to pay for these exports. Whatever is available, whatever's left, they're going to bid it up, and they're going to outbid the poorer countries. And these West African countries economically cannot compete with the UK. Soon they're going to be competing with all of Europe, the world as a whole. When it comes to all agricultural products, they're going to be competing with wealthy nations like China, Japan, South Korea, that are massive importers of food, who will bid up the price in order to get what they need. And the rest of the world's going to be left in the dark. And guys, this is just going to get worse, unfortunately, because these rising costs have led to the production of fertilizer by fertilizer production facilities in Europe not being competitive on the world market. And about a third of the fertilizer produced in the world as of a couple of years ago was based in Europe. And 70% of that production has been turned off since the end of last summer. Why? Well, because they simply cannot produce that fertilizer at a price that's competitive with other competing countries around the world that don't have those high input costs at their fertilizer production facilities. And so some people would say, well, okay, what's the problem? They'll just make up that production at one of those other facilities. Well, it's not that simple. Those facilities were already running near capacity. They might have a little bit, 1%, 2%, 5%, that they can increase their production. But no, it takes several years to build one of these factories. It's not going to happen overnight. And so if the productive capacity of Europe has gone down, they've cut it off because it's uncompetitive, that means that less fertilizer will be available in the year ahead, which means the price of what fertilizer is available goes up. So what is applied is going to make that food more expensive. But again, there won't be enough to apply what we applied in the past, which means the crop yields will be lower, which means the food will be more expensive a year from now than it is today. All of this is coming. It's basic math. There's no other way around it. It has nothing to do with Brexit. It has everything to do with poor planning and poor decision making by politicians around the world, and particularly in Europe. And this reliance on Russian natural gas in order to run their factories, in order to power their economies. And now we're seeing the result of all of that. All of this inflation, the government shutdowns, the money printing that has led to all of this. And so, when you see all of this set up, the fragility of the food supply chain, the escalation of the war, the Western proxy war in Ukraine against Russia, you have a setup where you look at it and you think, I could quickly see how Revelation 6 could play out in quick succession with global war and then famine. Will that happen? I don't know. I tend to think not. I think that's still a future time away. I could be wrong. But if it's not, and there could still be a regional conflict. If this is all a setup to Revelation 6, well, I don't plan to be here, and if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, you won't be here either. But if this isn't Revelation 6 and this is just some regional war taking place or high input cost, all of these issues we're seeing play out before the rapture occurs and we're around for it, are you prepared? Are you prepared for these food shortages? We've talked in the past, make sure that you are prepared. Put extra cans away. Make sure that you have a deep pantry, that you're taking care of yourself, your family, your friends, your neighbors. And we're going to talk on Friday in the Friday's video, because I'm getting a lot of questions from people on how do you prepare for CBDCs. We've been over some of those things in the past, but we're going to do it again because I keep getting these questions. What if the central bank digital currencies come while we're still here? How do we deal with that? What happens if we see these food shortages strike? What happens if there is a broader war in Ukraine and we have attack on our local infrastructure? You have a cyber attack that shuts down your power, your water supply, your municipal water and power supply. How are you going to deal with that? Do you have a plan for that? So we're going to talk on Friday about things that you can do to prepare for that, because, while we have a promise from Jesus that he will keep us from the time of testing that comes upon the whole world, the tribulation. That's from Revelation 3:10. We also have Jesus telling us that in this world there will be many trials and tribulations. So we're not to be protected from all suffering, all bad things that can happen. Bad things can still happen. But we need to remember what Jesus also said. He said, "But take heart, I have overcome the world." Guys, Jesus is our hope. Jesus is where we should have our focus. We should have our eyes and attention on Jesus, on the Word of God. We should be grounded in that. And the Word of God tells us to prepare, to be wise and to prepare. So on Friday, we'll talk about what we can do to prepare. But in the meantime, what can we learn from all of this? Well, when you read an article in the news, start at the bottom and work your way up, because they start with the propaganda and become less and less propaganda as you get to the bottom. Usually it's still propaganda at the bottom, but you get more truth at the bottom because they're trying to push this narrative, and they know, 80% of the people read the headline, and then 50% read the byline, and then 50% of those read the first sentence. By the time you get to the end, nobody's left reading. And so that's where they bury all the real facts. They tend to put the real facts there so that later they can say, well, we told you this was the problem. We've been saying all along this was the issue. But in the meantime, they want to push their propaganda. This is Brexit. If only, the UK would go back into the EU, everything would be wonderful. They'd have tomatoes everywhere, right? Cucumbers everywhere. Lettuce would be abundant. But it's their poor government policies of the EU and the UK that have led to these issues. All the Western governments, in fact, rejecting fossil fuels and driving up energy costs. And so that's driven up the input costs for the food. So expect to see this continue for the foreseeable future, because it's not getting better. The fertilizer costs are still elevated. And again, there could, at any time, we could see some sort of break in the supply chain. It's a fragile global supply chain that could make things worse. So are you prepared? Make sure you prepare. So what do you think? Leave your comments below. Make sure to like and share this. And God willing, I will see you on Friday. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.